Hi everyone, Tanya Hertz here. We are going to look at the rest of the various components of job performance other than just task performance. So we'll look at counterproductive behavior and citizenship behaviors, which are often kind of overlooked when you're thinking about job performance. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you, and we will look at those two other types of performance dimensions, like I said, citizenship and counterproductive behaviors. And citizenship behavior is the voluntary activities that may or may not be rewarded by an organization, but that do contribute to the organization in general by improving the quality of the work setting. So these are things that make it better to work at a given place. And there are two types of, or two overarching broad classifications within citizenship behavior. There's organizational citizenship behaviors and interpersonal. Organizational behavior involves the behaviors that support or defend the organization through different actions like voice. So voice is offering ideas that will improve the organization. Often when we see something wrong, when an employee sees something that's not working well, they'll speak up for change. That's using their voice. Civic virtue is participating in those company activities that are not necessarily required of the employee, but just make it a better place to work. So that's doing things like going to company picnics, or when somebody asks you, hey, will someone volunteer to take on this, that, or some other thing, and the employee says, yes, that's me. That's participating in civic virtue. Boosterism, now this is again, it's a positive organizational citizenship behavior that is speaking up for the company, that's talking about the company in a positive way whenever they're in public. So that's putting things on social media saying, wow, I love my job, or thanks to my boss for this, or other things that we do that make the organization look good. And this is I think if any of you, just when we were talking about food servers earlier, I think a lot of us have seen the opposite of this when people talk bad about an organization in public, and that's something that you can see very easily can harm the organization. And if anybody's ever heard a food server talking bad about a restaurant, it's a scary thing, right? Interpersonal citizenship behaviors, these also assist and support the organization, but they help the coworkers, and they help coworkers in a way that go above and beyond what's normally expected or required in an organization. So again, it's not the tasks that are required in a given job to complete the job. It's helping the people at the job. So helping is one way. So if somebody is having trouble, doesn't know maybe what to do when they first start, it's offering a helping hand, being courteous, being sportsmanlike, right? Good job, saying like pat on the back kind of things. These are all interpersonal citizenship behaviors, and all make the organization a better place to work and have a positive effect. And they're all actually part of job performance. I will say a lot of managers actually rate organizational and interpersonal citizenship behaviors even higher than task performance when giving performance evaluations. So if you as an employee are trying to do well in an organization, maybe move up in an organization, do well in performance evaluations, keep this in mind, right? Keep this in mind. These are the kind of things that matter to a lot of managers, even more than task performance. So again, it's a spectrum between organizational and interpersonal, and all of these different types of behaviors contribute to a positive climate in an organization, and help an organization to achieve its goals and to succeed. So counterproductive behavior is the opposite. Counterproductive behavior is the third component of job performance, and this is the only negative component that we look at. And these are behaviors that are intentional on the part of the employee, and they hinder organizational goal accomplishment, or another way to look at that is they are bad for the company, right? They don't help, but they hinder. The four types of organizational counterproductive behaviors include property deviance, production, political, and then personal aggression. And we'll go through them one by one, starting with property deviance. So property deviance is a type of counterproductive behavior that harms an organization by having a negative impact on its assets or the possessions of the organization. Counterproductive behavior in the form of property deviance can take the form of stealing from a company. I had an example of this when we had the wholesale food production company, when I was making the baked goods for Trader Joe's, and we had one group of employees. There was a couple employees who were sabotaging the night crew's food by putting eggshells in the recipes. And we found out pretty quickly that it was sabotage, but it cost us a lot of money. It cost a lot of ill will. It was a horrible experience. And yeah, so hopefully that doesn't ever happen in your organization, but yeah, it can happen. So production deviance is not it's a type of theft also, but it's a lot more subtle. It's wasting, right? It's reduction in efficiency, intentional wasting of resources, intentionally giving away things that belong to the organization. So this would be things like if you have a restaurant or a bar, giving friends free drinks and food. We include substance abuse in production deviance because I don't know if any of you've ever worked with somebody with, let's say, a hangover. It's very easy to see that that person is not operating at 100% capacity, and there's a significant reduction in efficiency and efficacy of work output. So that's why we consider it production deviance. Now, political deviance is it's operating in a negative way in the organization politically. So this is talking bad about somebody behind their back, gossiping, being incivil, being hostile, being in general a negative person to work with, saying things often untrue about other employees. And I don't know, I'm sure all of us have worked with negative people. I'm sure all of us have worked with negative people in the past, but it is so important as a manager that when you have an employee who's engaging in political deviance, that you get to the root cause of that immediately, and you remove that person from the organization. If it's serious enough, that you remove that person from the organization immediately. These kinds of people, it's like a bad potato. I don't know if you've ever had a bad potato in a sack of potatoes. It will make the entire sack of potato go rotten fast. And rotten potatoes, they stink, right? So do employees like this. You do not want these kind of people in your organization. They can affect the culture and climate so quickly and so profoundly. And it's actually one of the easier ways to adjust the culture in an organization very quickly is to just remove those bad apples or bad potatoes. Personal aggression is the final form of counterproductive behavior, and that involves being hostile, both verbal, and it could even include personal aggression in the form of physical actions, harassment, abuse. It can be very serious, and it can be, well, extremely detrimental. And of course, as an organization, you can be held liable for what your employees do. So it's so important that they receive training on and intervention for harassment and any type of personal aggression, right? So counterproductive behavior, any of these will hinder goal accomplishment on the part of the organization. There are, this chart shows organizational and interpersonal, minor to serious on a spectrum. And I think this might be a little bit of an oversimplification of the different types of counterproductive behaviors, because I'm sure it's easy to see how, there are times when, like, substance abuse could be on the more serious side, where theft, stealing a pencil, could be on the less serious side. So I'm not sure that I love the minor to more serious, but I think in general we get the gist of how in general these types tend to be more serious. But all of these are negative. All of these are negative for an organization. All right. So let me ask you this. What do you think? Do you think that all of these types of behaviors, and I'm talking about all of the behaviors that we've seen, so counterproductive behavior, all of the citizenship behaviors, task performance, are they all correlated? Are there correlations in there? Is there a relationship between task performance and citizenship behavior, right? How does counterproductive behavior relate to task performance? How does that relate to citizenship behavior? Think about it. If an employee is a bad potato, would they also not be good citizens? Would they also be bad at task performance? So I'd like you to think about this a little bit before we answer that. And in fact, perhaps maybe I'll ask you what you think in a poll. But in answer to this, let me share with you some research. So I'm going to go ahead and push pause, and I will share with you some research studies. All right, so there are several research studies that we look at that show the correlations between the different types of behaviors, and there is a strong negative correlation with citizenship behavior and counterproductive behavior. So somebody who is engaging in counterproductive behaviors, any of the counterproductive behaviors, that's strongly negatively correlated with citizenship behavior. So let me put that another way. If somebody is engaging in counterproductive behaviors such as sabotage, theft, incivility, gossiping, any of these, they're less likely to be good citizens. I think that's one of those research examples that I think it just kind of makes sense without even having to do the research. But then what do you think that correlation is with the task performance? Do you think if somebody engages in counterproductive behaviors, they're more likely to be better in task performance or worse in task performance? Is there a correlation? Well, the answer is yes, there's a correlation, but it is very weak correlation, right? Unlike that strong correlation between counterproductive behaviors and citizenship behaviors, it's just a very weak correlation between task performance. So I think you can see, even people who maybe are not the nicest or most civil people, or people who do things maybe to sabotage or steal from the company, could still be good at the tasks of their job. And that's why it's so important when we look at job performance to look at all facets of job performance. All right, so I'm gonna stop here, and then we'll come back for the final video for the last part of this PowerPoint.